Before I start this video, please do me a favor and click on that like button. And if you are new to this channel, hit subscribe. Now, onto the video. I am a 15-year-old girl that recently moved to Germany. My father lost his job prior to this, and we decided to live in Germany and rent a very cheap and affordable apartment on the 3rd floor. The thing is, this neighborhood is not so safe. To be honest, there is a lot of crime going on, especially due to prisoners being let out and released because of the ongoing pandemic. But anyways, I can't blame my parents. Like I said, they couldn't afford a safer place. Back to my story, my parents left me home alone to visit some friends in the far center of the city to sign a work contract. The meeting started at 8 p.m. and lasted until 10 p.m. and I was left at home during that time. Keep in mind that we live far away from the center. Not only that, but there's a lot of traffic. So I would expect my parents to come back home somewhere between 1 or 2 a.m. Anyways, after they left, I locked my front door and I started listening to some music and goofing off. At around 1 a.m., I started hearing some strange noise coming from outside my door. Like someone was trying to open the front door. I stopped my music and put my headphones down to go check it out. I go to the front door and I see that the door handle was moving. Without a doubt, someone was trying to break into my house. I stepped closer to the door and looked through the peephole. I saw a tall, big man in a hoodie and in all black. He looked like he was in his late 40s and his face was covered in scars and wrinkles. His eyes were bloody red, like he had been doing some illegal substances. He looked absolutely crazy. What was worse is that in his hands was something sharp, something shiny. It looked like a butcher's knife. I freaked out, but covered my mouth, trying not to make any sound, and walked to the kitchen. I grabbed my dad's fake gun to try and scare the intruder if he manages to break in, and I sat there for a few minutes trying to wrap my head around this scenario. A few minutes later, I gathered all my courage and walked to the front door. I peeped through the peephole again, however, he was nowhere to be found. I began walking back to the kitchen when all of a sudden I heard a woman scream. Without hesitation, I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. Soon after, the police arrived, and after I told them what had happened, they did some investigating and found my neighbor's dead body in her apartment. Her foot was cut off, and unfortunately, they found her foot next to my door. It has been a few days since then, and unfortunately, they still have not found the man. Honestly, I don't know what would have happened if the front door was not locked. And sometimes I lay awake thinking about that. So, stay safe, and don't forget to lock your doors when you are home alone. I was about 7 and my brother was 13, and we still shared a room. I was always afraid of the dark when I was a kid. Periodically, I would wake up in the night and call for my mom to come and turn on the hall light to be used as a nightlight, much to the enjoyment of my brother. One night, in the middle of winter, I woke up, and right before I called out for my mom, I noticed that there was a man on the deck that was on the other side of the wall from our bedroom. I froze. I was totally freaked and tried to scream, but I could only make this high-pitched squeaking sound. The only thing I could do was cry. After what seemed like hours, my dad heard me and came in to see what was wrong. The man was gone, of course, when I told him, and he blew it off as a nightmare. Until my brother, from under his covers, said that he saw him too. With that, my dad went outside with the shotgun. There were footprints in the snow outside our window and the window of my parents' bedroom. That took a while to recover from. I met Carter at a convention. Right off the bat, he scared me. I heard rumors that he'd nearly been removed from the extremely liberal convention. But he seemed nice enough and lonely, so I decided to befriend him since he insisted. Then I noticed that he was always nearby. When I was walking to my hotel, he was there. When I was eating lunch, he was there. When I was in my private group, he waited outside the door. When I went to meetings, he went too and sat beside me. He usually either walked up to me and started a conversation, which ended in awkward silence, or just stared at me from 50 yards away. I couldn't believe he was really following me, so I went to my hotel, disguised myself, and went outside to see if he was there. He was, literally lurking in the trees nearby. He pressured me into giving him my number, so I gave him a fake one. He found my professional information and begged me to look over his work, which I declined. He asked me if I'd be at a party, and I lied and said no. He showed up anyway. Somehow, he knew I decided to go. He always talked about how lonely and depressed he was and how I was a lifeline until... On my way home from the convention, I had no phone service during the flight. He freaked out and spammed 49 messages until ending with, "Okay, fine, I'm going to kill myself now, just so you know." Strongly implying that it was my fault for not answering him immediately. I told him to call 911. I then blocked him. He contacted me through Instagram, Hangouts, email, and much more, but I never replied. I asked the convention security to speak with him about his creepy behavior, and I was told to just turn off your phone. Fast forward a few months. I get an email from James asking me to look over his work. Not a big deal, I run a program specifically for this sort of thing. I agreed since his email was very polite and well worded, but he seemed pushy in a way I couldn't quite figure out. I ignored it, reviewed his work, and ceased communication. You know where this is going. A little while later, he confessed that it was Carter all along. He put all the blame on me and apologized in a horribly manipulative way, begging me once again to review his work. I never replied, and here we are. This is a real story. I'll tell it truthfully. I was in a small town in the countryside. That particular night, I was sleeping rough in a small corridor with a tin roof. It was raining heavily and was pretty cold. The noise of the rain on the tin roof was keeping me up at night. After a few hours of lying there with my eyes closed, I got fed up and just stared at the wall in front of me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something white flapping in the wind. I turned my head as a reaction to the movement. There was a young pale-looking woman standing in the rain at the very entrance of the corridor with her back turned to me. She had long wet black hair and was wearing a sleeveless white dress made out of hundreds of individual strips of cloth. She wasn't wearing any shoes, and her dress was flapping furiously in the wind. I have never seen an item of clothing that looked like this before or since. It was almost like the strips of cloth were growing from her skin. I instantly grabbed my shoes and stood up in shock. At first I thought she was homeless and I was in her spot, so I walked away a few feet and turned to look at her again. She didn't move. I've seen too many horror movies, so I didn't approach her, but my curiosity was piqued. I wanted to get her attention, so I put my shoes on and stomped loudly on the ground a few times, mainly to see if she would turn around. Well, she didn't. After a few more seconds of staring, I lost my nerve and just walked away. There's no telling how long she was standing there in the rain before I noticed her. It could have been for hours. To this day, I don't know if it was a prank or a ghost or just some crazy person. However, there are definitely no other homeless people in that town, and she looked far too clean to be homeless. I've searched online for similar dresses and never seen anything like it, so if it really was a prank, they were incredibly committed. One time, my parents had left for work. My sisters had gone to school, and I, a 20-year-old female, was alone at home. My neighborhood is in a fairly secluded area, situated on top of a huge hill, so it's fairly rare to have anyone visit. I was lounging around and watching TV when I heard the doorbell ring. I never answer the door as, again, we never have anyone visiting, and my family obviously know how to get in the house themselves. So I ignored it, even when it rang a second time. By the third time, I was a little annoyed, and I tiptoed over to the front door. The front entrance of our house is essentially a big wooden door surrounded by wall, so there isn't any way for us to check who's on the outside. This means there's also no way for anyone on the outside to know if we're there, unless we're stomping around in the house. So I stood behind the front door, waiting for the person to leave. I mean, no one has answered your third doorbell ring. Surely you'd leave, right? Suddenly, there was this heavy banging on the door, which made me jump. I heard a deep man's voice speaking from the other side.
I know you're in there.
My heart jumped and got caught in my throat, and for a second, I'm looking around trying to figure out how the man knew. After a long silence, I heard muffled chatter, then the sound of footsteps leaving. I didn't dare to open the door in case they actually hadn't left. After, I called my parents to check if anyone was supposed to be visiting. I was a little surprised by the odd encounter, but eventually I went back to watching TV and soon forgot about it. 2 hours later, I hear the doorbell ring again. Feeling a sense of nervousness, I turned down the TV volume. This time I got up slowly and snuck over to the piano room, where I could possibly sneak a peek and see who's there. I knelt down and slowly raised my head over the sill to see. At the door was a woman dressed in all black high heels, a plain black dress which came down to mid-calf, and an unusually large brimmed black hat, which was bizarre considering it was summertime and very hot. She had long dark brown hair, though her face was covered by the brim of her hat. The only thing I could see were her bright red lips, pulled up in an eerily wide smile. Beside her was a tall, buff guy wearing a dark suit. I don't remember much of his features except that he was a Caucasian man and had a very serious expression. What disturbed me most wasn't so much the intimidating guy, but the sight of the woman who stood there, literally unmoving, smiling at the front door which was yet to be opened. It felt like a solid minute before she finally took a step back, and without a word began to walk down the driveway. The man followed her step. To this day, I'm not sure who she was, why they were at the door, and whether they were the ones which had knocked at the door earlier. But, needless to say, the deep voice calling,
"I know you're in there,"
and the image of the woman in black was not one to forget easily. Thanks for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, check out my other videos on screen now. And of course, Happy Halloween.